Right.
Recording in progress, it says. All right, hello everyone. Okay, let's see, enable the live transcription, yes. Okay, good. Well, good.
Now, I don't have the full screen, Richard.
What's that?
I don't have the full screen anymore. I just have the column with participants.
Well, Benita can help you on that.
Okay.
Benita, what should he do?
What do you?
I don't have the main. In other words, I don't have the main screen. I have a column on the right with the participant.
Oh, okay. Well, you can remove that if you want. Just click on participants again, and it'll remove.
I see that closed caption is working. That's good. It is Norman. Yes, yes. Good to see you, Norm. Okay, I said we're going to start at 7 o'clock. It's 7:02. Welcome, everybody, to the Journal-isms Roundtable for October 7th, 2021. My name is Richard Prince, and I write a column called Journal-isms, which is about diversity issues in the news business. We do this roundtable once a month. We started in 1999, and we've been going strong ever since. We usually held them in restaurants in Washington, D.C., but we've been doing it by Zoom since the pandemic began last year. So welcome, everybody. I like to say this is about networking. We're here to network and to learn. So use the chat room, please, for your networking. And you can set it to just talk with one person or a few people or everyone. And then at the end of the evening, we'll be able to distribute to those who are on the call a record of the chat. So without further ado, we want to start, we're going to start with the say their names people, because they have to leave in about an hour, and then we'll go on to our toasting. And I have, of course, their book. You can see it in the background of some people there, and there we go. Say their names, how Black lives came to matter in America. And we have the authors with us. And this came with a little blurb here, a little sheet here of blurbs from people that I'll just read. The first one is from Nikki Giovanni. She leads it off. Sometimes the seed falls and luckily it begins to rain. Some folk complain, but the rest of us watch the bud grow and the mint cleanse the air. And we say their names about a wonderful book. So that's Nikki Giovanni. And then the next one is from Gene Robinson, Washington Post columnist and MSNBC analyst and former colleague of many of the authors and of myself. He says, essential reading for anyone who wants to understand where we are in America's long struggle with racism and white supremacy and how we got here. It is not the, quote, first rough draft of history, but rather a polished assessment of recent history that will stand the test of time. So with that, we want to hear from the authors. If each of you could limit your remarks to no more than 5 minutes, then we can take questions from everybody afterward. I also want to welcome the students from American University who are here. We're fortunate to have them join us, and we'll have them introduce themselves when it's time for the introductions. The first one I want to call in among the authors is Curtis here. Curtis Bond.
Curtis isn't with us today.
Okay. Well, I'd like somebody to explain how this whole thing came about. Whose idea was it?
It was my idea.
Was that Keith?
This is Michael Cottman.
Oh, Michael, where are you? I can't. Okay. There you are. Okay, I see you. Yeah. All right. You can go first. How did this all start?
I'll just start out with just giving you the real deal.
Real deal.
Started on the back. I scribbled on the back of a napkin. To be honest with you, after George Floyd's murder.
Okay.
And after watching CNN and MSNBC and watching the heinous and senseless deaths and murders of African-American men and women, at the hands of police. And I just started making some notes about maybe a story. I write in a journal anyway. So most evenings, sometimes I'll jot down thoughts in a journal Sometimes these thoughts will end up in a story. Sometimes they'll end up in a book, maybe even a screenplay. I don't know. So I didn't know where this was going, Richard, I'll be honest with you, but I knew that this was a pivotal moment. I knew that this was a crucial time in our history. And I wanted to document it and chronicle in some way. So I began making some notes. And I believe that this book idea, even though I began to think about a book about it, I thought that the concept, the core concept for this book probably started decades ago with each of us, with Keith Harriston and Curtis Bunn and Nick Charles and Patrice Gaines writing about social issues, criminal justice, law enforcement issues decades ago. So we all know that Black folks have been challenged for years, right? And with white supremacy and systemic racism, but I knew I couldn't do this book alone within the time frame. And that's something that maybe we can talk about too with students as they embark on this journalism career. We were under a tight deadline, but I can get to that a little later, and Keith can talk about it as well. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. So I reached out to 4 journalists, Richard, who I thought were outstanding journalists, who were compassionate and passionate people, who were thoughtful, who have covered these issues over years and not only watched them evolve, Richard, but also analyze it, right? Understand it, interpret it, right? And be able to offer concrete stories and fresh ideas for readers. So I reached out to Keith and Curtis and Patrice and Nick and just asked them, would you write about the Black Lives Matter movement? Will you write about the impact of COVID-19 on Black community and communities of color? Will you write about the friction between law enforcement and the Black community, mass incarceration, the role of the Black church, women in politics, Trump and the U.S. Capitol insurrection, politics of race? So we think that we produced a book that's unprecedented, that's unparalleled. We think it's a model for the book industry. Our publisher, the Hachette Book Group, told us that she can't recall a book where 5 writers have come together to share their expertise to write about systemic racism and social justice in one voice, right? And during a pandemic. So we feel that this book is informative. We think it's uplifting, thought-provoking, offering fresh ideas, and a book that we think will stand the test of time.
What was your role in the book? I mean, what did you write about?
I wrote about politics. I wrote about the politics of race. And I wrote about that because I thought that politics impacts every aspect of our life, on jobs and healthcare and education, and the importance of us being at the table, the importance of us as not just older people, but I'm talking about the younger folks being involved in the political process at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, because politics impacts our quality of life. For good or bad. So if we're not at the city council, sitting on the city council seats, if we're not in the halls of Congress, if we're not on school boards, then we can't impact the Black community with decisions. And so I opened the book by saying these are compelling questions that the Black community asks. Who will stand up for us? Who will champion our causes? Who will have our backs? Who will have the courage to speak our names? And I spoke some names that you recognize: Adam Clayton Powell and Barack Obama and David Dinkins and Mayor Bottom, Shirley Chisholm, Eleanor Holmes Norton. And these are people who have fought for years for racial injustice. So I wrote about being, one of the first African-American reporters to cover Mayor Dinkins, the first African-American mayor of New York, and the only. I talked about covering what I believe was one of the ugliest racial riots demonstrations in New York history, involving 10,000 police officers who stormed City Hall to protest David Dinkins, using the N-word, being so, many of them drinking beer, many of them carrying guns, and I'm one of the few Black reporters in this crowd of 10,000 cops. City Hall police security came out to get me, to ask me if I wanted to come inside because they felt that I was my life was in jeopardy, or safety. I was not exaggerating, but I'm just maybe safety. But here's an event that had to be covered, right? And so here are these police officers using the N-word to describe New York City's first Black mayor. And when I walked back into the newsroom at first, some of the editors didn't believe me. They didn't believe that
You were at Newsday then, New York Newsday?
The Newsday didn't believe that these officers were using the N-word to describe Mayor Dinkins. It wasn't until several other white columnists came in to say the same thing, and they were outraged, as I was, that they believed me. So, so I write about that. You know, I write about covering 8 years of Obama and interviewing him on the campaign plane a couple of weeks before the campaign plane turned into Air Force One in such a way, right? And it talked about his ideas about where this country is headed, about race, about parenting. And so so I thought politics and race was a good place for me because it comes naturally. It's something I cover. It's something I care about. I think it's something that's critical to this country. And I thought it's interesting because, Richard, that I'm hoping that young people read this book as well at the same time. But I want people to become, and our people to become, more active in the political process.
Okay, sounds good.
And
all right, who's next? Oh, sorry, Michael.
No, that's okay. No, I see. I got the hook. I mean, Richard got the. Who's next? Whoa! All right. Well, let me toss it to Keith Harriston to talk about his incredible role. And can I set this up just a little bit, if you don't mind?
Please, please.
Keith Harriston is an incredible, many of you know, incredible reporter. And Keith worked at the Washington Post for 23 years, where he was a senior manager. And I need to tell you that I graduated from Clark College way back in the day. Keith was at Morehouse, and we were freshmen. And he told me that one day, Michael, I'm going to move back home to Washington, D.C., get a top job at the Washington Post, and I'm going to hire you.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Keith, yeah, go on. He's just talking, all right? He did it. He did it. He moved back, he got a job, and he hired me at the Washington Post. And so today, Keith is a professor at George Washington University, shaping young minds. And I was just so grateful that Keith said yes when I asked him. I'm sorry, it's a telemarketer. When I asked Keith would he join this project, and he was so enthusiastic.
Oh, what happened?
Wait. Oh. Okay.
He got muted, Richard.
Oh, I'll pick up.
Okay.
Because
here we go.
Right.
But he hired me at the Post. I wanted to, again, kind of repay the favor also, because I wanted him to be a part of the project, and Keith said yes, and here we are today. Keith.
All right.
Okay, thanks, Michael. And Richard, thanks for having us all here, by the way. I appreciate it. It's probably, for me, one of the most important exchanges and discussions that we're going to do, because I know a lot of these people, and I know that we have so much in common in terms of what we do and what we have done and what we've been through. I wrote about dealing with policing in our communities, in the Black community. And it was an easy decision. I'll be honest, it was a lot easier after I asked Cottman initially. I said, okay, we probably going to have to do this in about 5 months. How much are we going to get paid for this? And he gave me a satisfactory answer. And it helped me to dive into it, because we were all of us had full-time jobs when we were doing this. I had a full-time job and 2 part-time jobs while we did this. And so it was a lot of work. But I thought it was going to give me an opportunity, and it turned out to be right, but I thought it was going to give me an opportunity to complete
recording in progress.
To complete work that I had started as a reporter, not just at the Post, but before that, the Louisville Courier-Journal, and even for a summer as the main police reporter at the Detroit Free Press, and covering criminal justice issues and policing issues, work that I thought was unfinished. And what it led me, what I found incredibly is that that my quote unquote expertise as a person who, my last beat assignment at the Washington Post before I moved into editing and management was covering public safety policy. And I got accolades for it and was, was compensated well for it, won awards for it. But once I spent about 4 months researching this, and that's all I did aside from my other jobs, I found out that I really hadn't done a very good job on that beat. There were things that were left on the table. This gave me an opportunity to sort of correct it. Among the things that I discovered, I mean, and a lot of this is stuff that we all know now because we're all people who are well informed and read a lot, is that, for instance, that the federal government, even though they have some regulations in place, for instance, that require police departments to report when they kill people, that an overwhelming majority of police departments don't even bother to comply, and nothing happens. I found that, that for many of us, our former employer, the Washington Post, is, at least at the time when they created it, the only place that had a database that showed, when police shot and killed people, broken down by state, by demographics. Doesn't exist. I found out, about the history of policing. One of the things I always wanted to try to do, and I could never do it when I was reporting at the Post in particular, was to try to figure out why do police police so differently in Black communities than they do in white communities. And I discovered that, that what happens in Black communities now is a lot like what happened when what a lot of people believe was sort of the predecessors to American police departments. Slave patrols were created in this country first, I think in the 18th century. The first slave patrols were created in South Carolina in the early 1700s. And essentially they were created because white people, slave owners, were always afraid, especially in those areas where, and it was most of those, most geographic areas, where the enslaved outnumbered the slave owners by a huge margin. So they were always fearful that Blacks were going to get together and revolt and kill all of them. Something close to that. So they came up with this idea of slave patrols. And slave patrols, essentially their job was just to harass Black people. You saw Black people, enslaved Black people or not. If you saw a group of them standing around talking, slave patrol would go over and say, "What are y'all doing? Move on, show me who owns you. What are you doing here? What are you all talking about? You shouldn't be here, move on," or whatever they wanted to do. And that sounded so familiar to me, not just from my reporting, but hell, growing up in Washington, D.C., when friends of mine and me would stand on corners talking. It was not uncommon for a police car to come up, pull up beside us and say, "Hey, what are y'all doing? Why are you standing here? Move on, go home. Just get off this corner." And we weren't doing anything. And there are other similarities. The stop and frisk policy in New York City under Giuliani. That's the same kind of things essentially that slave patrols did. And it goes on and on and on. And and that kind of policing doesn't happen in white communities. It just doesn't. A very good example of this is it was last summer, late summer, early September. There were a group of Black teenagers in a car in Congress Heights in Southeast Washington, doing stuff they shouldn't have been doing. They were in a car, they all had guns, all of them had guns, and they were streaming, them playing with the guns inside the car, streaming it on social media. Somebody reported it to police.
Open the door, we'll open it for you.
About 10 police cars showed up, tires screeching, etc., sirens blaring, pull up to the car. And of course, the kids, their reaction was, well, they get out of the car and start running, because of course, that's what you're going to do. One of the kids was running, had a gun in his waistband, and as he was running, he was reaching behind him to pull the gun out of his waistband to toss it away. So as he's running, unfortunately for him, toward a police officer. Pulls the gun out, he's going to throw it. And all the police officer saw was this gun in his hand as he was throwing it out, shot and killed the guy. It was an interesting thing about that. Police, the DC Police Department released the camera footage from the body cam from the police officer the next day, really quickly. And a lot of people in the neighborhood were like, well, can't run at police officers holding the gun. What do you expect? I talked to a lot of academics about that case and other things. And one of them pointed out to me when I explained to her, I was like, there was lots of, on the first night of the shooting, there were lots of protests at the police district station in that neighborhood. Lots of Black people, lots of white people. The police department released the body cam video. The next night, there were a lot of protesters who were overwhelmingly all white, overwhelmingly white. Black people had just essentially said, you know, guy shouldn't have been running at a cop with a gun in his hand. But as one of the academics pointed out to me, was a woman from Georgetown University, who in fact was the second person in charge of the DC Police Reform Commission that just did, you know, last summer, delivered a package of recommendations to the DC government. She said, look, if that situation had happened in Georgetown or any place in Ward 3 where there had been, you know, 4 white kids in a car with guns, would police have responded the same way? Would there have been 10 police cars with sirens blaring, just you know, rushing up to the car, coming out with their guns drawn, which is why the kids, she said, no, that wouldn't have happened. And so those kinds of things that, you know, were gave me answers that I wish that I had been able to deliver to people in a better way when I was a reporter. This has given me that opportunity. There are other things like that. I know I'm probably coming up on 5 minutes, so, but the big thing, and one of the reasons I really wanted to jump at the opportunity to do this is because I did feel like there was, you know, that my reporting on policing issues was unfinished, and this gave me an opportunity to complete it. But the story keeps changing. It doesn't stop. It didn't stop. Our deadline was like essentially election day last November. Story hasn't stopped. There's lots has happened since then. So, but anyway, that was it. That's the reason I jumped at the opportunity, and I hope people will get a lot and learn a lot from this. I sure did, and I thought I was an expert.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Keith. Who's
Richard,
next?
we have Patrice here.
Okay.
As well to talk, but right before Keith, right before we go to Patrice, I just want to say that Keith hit on a key point, and that is, you know, I wanted to make sure that the reporters that I reached out to were able to, now in the process I'm talking about, to make this deadline, about how important it was to make this deadline. Because when I went to the publisher and took this idea to my agent and the publisher, they were embracing it only if we can get this done in 6 months. 6 months, that was it. They didn't want it. If you can't do it in 6 months, we don't want it.
Was there any particular reason for 6 months?
Yeah, because you know what? Because we're writing in the moment. And this, a moment in time, a snapshot in time that we're writing about. And as Keith said, you know, the story continues. But right, so, you know, we can file our stories, but we don't stop being Black. You know, so the story,
right.
So right. So their point is that we want to get your ideas, your thoughts, your insights, your perspectives, your views on the shelves as fast as we can. Right. And so we did 2 years worth of work in 6 months. That's basically what it went down to. So it was it was a task. Patrice, would you please talk about your section?
Excuse me, just a quick second, Richard.
Yes.
Can you switch to the speakers for a bigger screen when they're talking?
Okay, let's see. How about that? This is speaker view that I'm on now.
Actually, you have to do it yourself. If you go up to the top right to view, it'll let you decide how you want to see people.
Okay, that's much better. Okay, can you do that, Don?
Well, yeah, but it's still got to switch to the person that's talking.
No, it's going to switch to the person that's talking on your screen, Don.
Okay, I got it on speaker right now.
Right. So everybody may not want their view on speaker view.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay, Don, by the way, is our photographer for the evening for this event. Okay, go ahead, Michael and Patrice, I believe, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yes. So my section is called Locking Up Black Lives, and it is about mass incarceration, and looks kind of at the history of that. And what was wonderful, I think, for me was the fact that I've written a lot about criminal justice, articles about from all kinds of angles. But this allowed me to connect the dots, to look at how we have been punished since we have been in this country. And I learned a lot too, just like Keith said, when you learn a lot, you think, I thought that I knew a lot about this because also on the side, I've always been actively involved with different organizations in organizing around this issue for decades. And first, a little bit about, I kind of fell into this. Life put me into this particular interest because when I was 21, I was busted with and charged with possession of heroin with intent to distribute and possession of a needle and syringe, which are felonies. And, had a lot of shame around that and hid it for a long time, including when I first went to the Washington Post, hid it. And then the Post, I had a time when I had to admit that I had this background. Well, I understood at that time, though, we were at a period where a newspaper would not have hired me if they knew about my criminal record. Maybe newspapers have changed now when it comes to that. I know after me, they hired Nathan McCall, but the country hasn't fully changed when it comes to that. I was dismissed from a job when I was 60, a part-time job, because they found out about my criminal record from age 21. So just being labeled as a convicted felon has, of course, changed my life and made me very interested and concerned about other people who have to live with this label, and also made me interested in how we developed this system that was very brutal and always incarcerates Black people at a disproportionate rate. We get longer sentences, we get from the time we are arrested, we're charged with harsher sentencing, everything. So in this section, I was able to look at how in the South we had slavery, in the North we had the first penitentiary started in 1790 in the city of brotherly love, ironically, in Philadelphia, and looked at even found a Black woman who had done research to find out who was in that particular that first penitentiary, and it reflected who was incarcerated now, as far as they were mostly Black and they were mostly poor. They were the more unskilled people, and a lot of people who had come north to escape slavery. And so I trace that and trace it till we have even Jim Crow, and we have convict leasing. And I have to say, it was very difficult, I know, for all of us, because we were living through this period just like everybody else, and all Black people, particularly during this period right after George Floyd was killed, and the killings continued. So we're living through this and the pandemic, and we're steeped in history that is really quite often depressing. And I know there were days when I was just angry. And whereas other times you had an opportunity to get away from that anger or that depression, whether it was to travel or whether it was to go out and eat with friends, we didn't have that option because of the pandemic. And so you go from this depressing research, and then you turn on the TV and you're still depressed. But I have to say also, in each case that we have included in our chapters, talking to visionaries who are working in each of these fields, and people that I found gave me hope because they see a way out. Now, there are all kinds of obstacles about that, but they have visions, and they have been doing this work, tirelessly doing this work. And that really gave me hope. During when I was doing this also, I have to say, in my particular part, we all had a difficult time trying to contact people because of the pandemic. As reporters, and I know as a feature writer, I was used to going to somebody's house, knocking on their door, establishing some kind of trusting relationship, and especially when I'm asking people about their backgrounds and how they came to be involved in crime and their sentencing, and spending time in prison, and all these really personal questions. And I say that this is a one time in life when my criminal record worked in my advantage. The only time I'd have ever had. So it gave me some street cred. I could say to people, look at I could say, look at my memoir. I could say, Google me, because I have written so many stories also about criminal justice, but they could also look up my background. And that was one way of establishing trust. Quite often I didn't get to Zoom or see these people also, so they had to believe in me to really trust me. So we were able to do that. Another thing that I did, and I think each of us did in all of our sections, is we tried to include the voices of people who aren't often asked to say anything. And so in my section, I had to make sure that I had people speak who have had the experience of being imprisoned. Now, I talked to a young man who had been out of prison for 3 weeks, and just about what that's like. And he was in prison now when George Floyd was killed. And he talked about the white guards around him. And he said pretty much all his guards were white. He said if you saw a black guard, they usually weren't there very long. And if they were, you just didn't trust them. But he heard white guards, saying, I wish I could get my hands on those Black Lives Matter people. Or, yeah, I would have shot his ass too. And all kinds of things that they have to listen to and not respond to in any way. So he had had this experience. He went into prison when he was 16, and he was 38 when I talked to him when he came out. And so I talked to 4 people who talked about their experience. And I just want to say the last thing is one of the threads that I've found that went through each of their lives, no matter what their crime was. I mean, in some of the cases, they did kill a person. But I think that even when you see each case, it was self-defense, or one case he was just on the scene, but he was charged because he was on the scene. He didn't do the actual killing. But one of the things that came up, and these people didn't know one another, they all talked about there was a point in their life as a young person where they had no hope, where they just felt like there was no way out. And these were all my people that were raised in North Philadelphia. I used Philadelphia because I was able to find data, because it has a high incarceration rate, but because they have a grant, a MacArthur Foundation grant, they kept a lot of data. But they all said there came this time they had no hope. And I even found a quote from James Baldwin where he talked about the age of 13, when you get to the point where you have no hope because you see how Black people are treated. And what they said was, when you have no hope, your life has no value, because what do you have to lose? And so it was then at that point, and being young, that they made these reckless decisions, because they all thought that at least if they got involved in a crime, maybe there was a way out. They could earn a living. They could buy good tennis shoes, clothes, have some sense of what they felt was power and change their lives. So anyway, it was just, I'm glad Michael asked me. I'm profoundly proud of the project. I like to think that when we're long gone, that young people will pick this up, and it will give them a good idea of what we were living through at this time and moment in history.
Thank you, Patrice. All right, so we're halfway through our time with the authors, but so let me pose this question. And Nick is next. Nick Charles.
Nick's
yeah. How has what you all have done, I'd like to hear from each of you, affected your views of what journalism should be and how it is practiced now and how it should be practiced? Okay, Nick, you're next.
Well, Richard, thank you guys for having me. This is not my first rodeo with you. Thank you so much for inviting us. A lot of the folks on here I've worked with or for in the past. So thank you guys for showing up. I think, as a journalist and as a Black journalist, you are always confronted with what folks who are quote unquote purists say, be objective. But the objective they talk about is always from their point of view. Michael being questioned about his veracity, about whether he was telling the truth about those police officers in 1991 who had made threats to the then mayor and to anyone who would come near them. You couldn't pass down Brooklyn that day, or if you wanted to commit a crime, that was the day to do it because there were no cops anywhere else except at City Hall. We are always questioned about our motives and also always extra scrutiny about our work. And it happens in a lot of different professions, but it happens in journalism as well, which has always led me to believe that it's not really the objectivity that they're after. It's to whether or not, if we have, quote unquote, any bias towards being favorable to Black and Brown communities. And it's not about bias towards Black and Brown communities. It's about the honest truth telling about Black and Brown communities and getting voices from Black and Brown communities. Because one of the things that's great about this book, we talk to majority Black folks. We talk to people who never get called, who never get interviewed, who never end up on the 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock news, who never end up in the New York Times, who sometimes don't even end up in their local papers. We talk to those folks because they have been living, they have lived experience, and they were willing to share it. You know, Patrice talked about how do you go about it, interviewing people in the time of COVID when you can't, do any good old shoe leather and go to their house and knock on the door or meet them up for coffee or for lunch. I found very little resistance when I picked up the phone and called folks and said, hey, we're doing this book and I'm writing this chapter about the Black church in the time of the Black Lives Matter movement. And they were so willing to talk. And I talked to majority Black women. And what people may not know is that there are more Black women in seminaries than there are Black men. The issue is when they get out of seminaries, there's no pulpit for them. And that pushback doesn't just come from male ministers, it comes from congregations themselves, which are predominantly female, who don't trust and have never really seen or experienced Black women in charge from the pulpit. So those are some of the things that I came to understand by listening to these women and sharing their stories.
Okay, all right. Do others of you want to weigh in on that about what you learned about journalism, or what lessons you took from all this about journalism and the way journalism should be practiced?
I'm sorry, Mike. There were things that I already knew. I think I learned a lot at the Washington Post. I always said I ended up feeling like I was a round peg in a square hole or something. And I learned that when I was trying to prove that 8 young men were not guilty of a murder that everybody seemed to think they did. They called them the 8th and H crew. And I see my old editor, Jackie Jones, on here. And I sometimes I feel like I just need to, I don't know, just, bow to Jackie because she had to fight for my stories every day because I chose stories that I was told at times, like, who cares about that person? I remember, Jackie, I don't know if you remember, I think you had to fight about this one too. I wrote about a young lady who had killed a man who had raped her mother's boyfriend who had raped her from, I don't know, like maybe age 13 to 19 or something. Yeah. And it was about, she did 12 years in prison, and it was about what it was like to do 12 years in prison, and your family pick you up and you can't even ride in a car because you get car sick because you haven't ridden in a car in 12 years. And the kids want to go to the amusement park, but you can't ride on a ride when you can't even ride in a car, and you want to brush your teenager's hair, and she says, I fix my own hair, Mama. And you missed all of that. So, but I had an editor say to me, who cares about that woman? She killed somebody. So, and then I had Jackie just fight for that story. And another section took it and ran it on the front. But I always seemed attracted to those kinds of stories because I knew what my story was. And it just, I knew. So that taught me a lot. And there was also a time and young people, young journalists should know this, that we would just ask police a question and just take what they said as the truth because they were the police. And we just quoted them and that was it. I think we're a little better now. We're better, but there are still people who believe that because they're the police. They tell the truth. And so things like that, when I looked at research, looking at you know, how newspapers are culpable, all the stories they did not cover, you know, over history that the Black press covered, that, you know, so when I'm doing my research, the things that were ignored because we were not valued as a part of the community.
Okay. Michael or Keith?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think one of the takeaways for me was that to continue to be an activist in my journalism, that I felt free this time, and I have before, but freer this time to bring in people to tell our truth in a way that is unfiltered. And that I learned that I can approach a publisher without the hesitancy of somebody not embracing our idea, our vision, or our mission. And so in 1995, I wrote the first book to chronicle the Million Man March for a major book company, publisher, Crown Random House. I had the occasion to go to an interview for a newspaper job around that time. When I arrived at the office, the person who was interviewing me slides something across the table and says, "What is this?" And it was my Million Man March book. And I said, "Wow, oh, that's my Million Man March book," something I was proud of. And he says, we don't really want activism here at this newspaper.
What newspaper was this?
I don't want to get into it. Jackie remembers this story well. We all have a Jackie Jones story.
Okay.
Jackie knows a lot. I'm just saying, you know, Jackie's there with me holding my hand and, you know, the whole way. I wasn't an activist, I didn't think. I was chronicling a historic moment in our time, the Million Man March.
Mm-hmm.
Many people, and I looked around and they had other books on the shelf of other writers who were white, who have written books over time. Why is mine different? Why am I different? So say their names. This gives us an opportunity to give voice to the voiceless, gives me an opportunity to work with these fine journalists, you know, who are telling their truth, and gives me an opportunity to tell my truth too, and our truths unfiltered. And that's what I took away. And that's my mission until I draw my last breath.
All right. Okay. All right, Keith.
Thank you, Jackie.
How does it change journalism? Well, you know, I think each of us, when we, as journalists, we go through a process. If you have an expertise in something, you go through a process as you're working on that expertise of people who are in that field that you trust, that you know, and you believe, and people that are just people. Like, you know, it could be, you know, it could be a dozen of them, it could be 10 dozen. They're just all lumped together. At least that's how it was for me. And I think we all sort of work that way. But, you know, but the thing that it's not so much the individual sources that you develop. For me, and looking back after this experience, it is the kinds of questions that you actually ask or try to find answers to. Like, I spent a lot of time as a reporter covering public safety policy in the District of Columbia, focused on the policies. Here's an example. In 1990, God, I'm going back here, 1994, for instance, Sharon Pratt Kelly was the incumbent mayor. She was running for re-election. Marion Barry had been convicted of cocaine possession, had been sent to prison, came out of prison. The city, of course, embraced him, and he was going to run against her in a Democratic primary. She was searching for some way. She knew if he ran against her in a primary, she was going to lose. I mean, that's just how it was. Not, you know, whatever your stand on Barry is, she knew he was going to win the Democratic primary. So she decided, what can I do? What can I possibly do to maybe hold him off? So she decided to take what was then, and even now to some degree would be a pretty ambitious effort. She decided she was going to overhaul criminal justice and policing in the city. And she said, we're no longer, you know, DC was locking up more people than almost any other urban jurisdiction in the country. You know, and she said, we're going to stop locking people up. We're going to stop this, what she called in her own words, this John Wayne policing in our Black communities. And then she went from ward, every ward had town hall meetings that were all packed, because I went with her to all of these. And she said, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to change. And she lost by a lot. Now, a lot of that had to do with the fact that the city was basically telling the federal government, you can't take Marion Barry away from us. He's ours and you can convict him, but we're going to put him back in office. But it wasn't even close. But the thing is, she brought that up in my reporting of that. And it wasn't just me, it was other people at the Post. We reported the politics of it. We didn't report the issues that she was talking about. Not really. I mean, people sort of did, but we didn't dive deep into it. And, you know, hindsight is always 20/20, but I do think that the kinds of questions that journalists ask, we need to think about it, and we need to go deeper, and we have to think about policies and why policies are. I mean, with police departments, for example, I mean, police departments work for, usually the mayor or the county executive. So you would think that they should be able to say, okay, you know what, stop doing this. You know what, stop, no more stop and frisk in Ward 7 and 8, stop. And if you do it, we're going to get rid of you. But that's pretty much impossible to do for a lot of reasons. One is because businesses, which hold the real levers of power in most places, they don't want that. They don't want it. And those are the same people who fill the campaign coffers of people who are trying to go and elect up and get elected or re-elected to office. And so I just think for me, it has said you have to really ask much more thoughtful and probing questions on broader issues as opposed to individual things. And it's I want to just add one more thing real quickly. We did, this did give me an opportunity to talk, and we did talk to people who weren't ordinarily going to be interviewed. One of those people for me, I talked to a Black chief of police of about a 50-person police department in Sunflower, Mississippi. He comes from a family of police officers, and he articulated much better, because most of the people that I know in law enforcement are in urban areas, but he articulated for me a big problem with policing in this country. And he said, it's very simple. He said, one, most of the people who are hired in police departments in this country were raised in neighborhoods where it was almost exclusively white, have never had any interactions with Black people. So the only things that they know about Black people are what they see in mass media. And because of that, they look at us and they see us as thugs. He said, and when you go into, and most police academies they spend little or no time on race. They don't discuss it in police training academies. And he said, and that's the biggest problem. They see us as thugs. And he articulated, he spelled out a lot of instances and anecdotes of things. But he made that point pretty clear. And I found him because he had, after George Floyd was killed, he had posted some things on social media that talked about that and how it made him feel, and how glad he was that even with a small police department of 60 people, that he was in a position where something like that would never happen, because he made it clear to his officers that he wouldn't stand for it. So they knew what they could do and couldn't do. But that's the kind of guy voice that you never hear, where all of the, sort of these Eastern newspapers, then they weren't going to talk to him. And he said nobody had ever talked to him. And he got like 500,000 likes on Facebook, and he posted also on Twitter and got up even more on Twitter. Nobody ever talked to him. But that's the kind of thing I think is that both Nick and Patrice mentioned, is talking to people. We talk to people who don't always get talked to, but two, on the broader issue about journalism, I think journalists really need to think more broadly and more deeply about the kinds of questions they ask.
Very good. I'll also add that at our last session with the Justice Department, one of the things that I think Kirsten Clark said, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, is that there are a lot of changes going on in police departments that are not being picked up by the media. And I think that the business about not teaching about race to police cadets maybe one of those things, that maybe there's some changes going on that we need to surface.
Yeah, well, the problem with that is that, yeah, you might do that at the Justice Department, but that has no impact on what you do in Sunflower, Mississippi.
Well, no, but
they
have grants and programs that are passed down to these local.
But they also, but the Justice Department also has regulations that require police departments to report when they kill people, and most police departments don't do it, and they aren't punished for it. So that's a whole nother. That's a whole nother story, actually. No, it is. They don't do it, but it's been written about, and it's been written about over and over again, and nothing ever happens. Well, look, the George Floyd Act, where is that? The Biden, Joe Biden ran in part saying, vote for me, Black people. I'm going to take care of this police thing. And what happened? Nothing. With that, it's stalled. It's probably not going anywhere. I mean, the other thing that I talk about in my section of the book is that I think, that we need to, like police unions have done, they've been really smart about this. They've gone to state legislatures and had laws drafted that essentially protect them. In some cases, created a separate class for police officers. So they're treated completely different, like a protected class when it comes to criminal charges against them. We need to do the same thing. We need to take the battle to the state legislatures, because that would be a really good start. I'll stop right after this. There are like 17 states in the District of Columbia that have some versions of something called the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. 17 states plus DC. Those 18 jurisdictions account for more than half of all police shootings. And there's a reason. The reason is because if you're a police officer in any of those 18 jurisdictions, you know how hard it is to get convicted. First of all, it's hard to get charged. And if you get charged, it's almost impossible to get convicted. And that's a big reason, because I'm not, the police unions are pretty smart. They're like, we can set up an apparatus that's pretty much going to give us protection. When you add qualified immunity to that on the federal level, they're pretty much protected against doing that. And yes, some things have changed, like the state of Colorado has made some changes along those lines. The state of Maryland essentially repealed its law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights. In fact, Maryland was the first state to enact that, and most of them were enacted in democratic states because of the powers of union. So anyway, yes, there have been some changes, but there's been a lot of stuff that has stalled.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is all this in your chapter?
Yes.
Oh, very good. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We're running out of time now, so we have time for a few questions. Who has a question? Jackie Jones has a question.
Yeah, most of you guys teach. What do you tell journalism students about the nature of reporting? And Keith, you alluded to building trust, and Patrice did as well. I mean, what are you telling students about how they should think about the process of reporting, not just going out and getting a story?
Patrice,
Jackie, I'm going to say this. I tell him to go to law school. I think one of the things that, somebody we knew, and I was like everybody else, loves Jackie Jones and has been in her debt forever, is that, our late great Mr. Payne said, the job of a journalist is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comforted. And journalists who go into this business for egotistical reasons, who go into this business to build reputations, but don't go into this business to bring truth and in some way try to uplift or better communities, have no business being journalists. If you're not going to go out there and do stories, I remember one of our old colleagues, George Jordan, used to say, I'm not happy till somebody goes to jail. Meaning, I know there's corruption. I know there's graft. I'm going to find it. And by finding corruption and graft and finding stuff that Keith was talking about in police departments, when you find those things, they have an impact on communities in a positive way, because all of a sudden it's now laid bare, and those who are in positions of power have to deal with it in a transparent way. So what I told journalists that I have taught, or aspiring journalists, is that be honest and understand that you're working for a community. You're not working just for your newspaper. to get a salary, but you're working for folks who don't have the time or don't have the training that you have to figure stuff out, to ferret stuff out that can better their lives.
Right.
Jackie and I are working together, in fact, on a project now with my company and Morgan State University to help train the next generation of journalists of color. And proud to work with Jackie on that. And Jackie, that's a good question. Nick, thanks a lot, because you reminded me of talking about Les Payne. Les used to say to me all the time, tell the truth and duck. And,
Okay, all right.
You know, never forgot that, right, Jackie? And so it's tenacity. It's understand. Nick made some great points about speaking for the voiceless and making sure that you understand that you're trying to empower your community. That is important. It's important to outline what you're trying to accomplish as a journalist in a particular story, but the tenacity and not give up. You know, COVID, you know, Nick talked about this, Patrice and Keith, you know, trying to get sources in COVID. You're working with students now, not Jackie's students, thank God, but a couple of other students who just said, I can't break through. You know, people won't call me back right away. I've got to, you know, what do I do? You keep calling. And if that person doesn't, okay, then you call the next person. Then you call the next person. You know, one thing, reason I brought every single one of these journalists in is because they have a deep, deep, deep Rolodex. Now, I don't even know what a Rolodex is anymore, but you know, but they have, right, a deep bench, deep sources. I mean, yes. Good grief, right? I mean, Nick's got Keith, Nick, they know everybody. Patrice, oh my goodness. So that brings value. So when we're talking to young reporters, what's important, it's important having sources, having people you can call, people you can contact, people you know who are going to come through with thoughtful, insightful comments for you. And so so that's what I try to instill in a lot of these students. You know, don't give up after a couple of phone calls. You know, keep calling.
Here, here. All right, Milton Alamati has a question. We can't see you, Milton.
Oh, hi.
All right.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank all the presenters, Patrice, Nick, Keith, Michael. You know, this is the kind of thing that you actually need 2 or 3 hours for. I have so many questions, but there's no time, so I'll focus only on one. Mm-hmm. In terms of the police public information departments, mm-hmm. and I'm sure all of you have encountered that and seen that. Let's look at the example of the Eric Garner story. The first article that came out in the New York Times did not even mention the word chokehold. You know, they took the police statement almost verbatim. It was so shameful. We wrote a very critical editorial denouncing that, right? And for some reason, some months later, mysteriously, the editorial disappeared from our website. But that's a different story. But I
you got to tell people where you're from, where this editorial.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I publish Black Star News, blackstarnews.com in New York.
Okay.
And by the way, Michael, thanks for those comments about Les. Les was a very dear friend of mine as well. But anyway, I suspect, and I'm just speculating, of course, that after incidents involving the killing of unarmed Black folk, probably, I would say probably 7 out of 10 times, the police lie in their statements that come out. And I think it was Patrice, or I forget who said, you know, we just used to quote what police said. They're supposed to be believed because they have titles. And I remember many years ago in the 90s, I was a stringer for the New York Times Metro Desk. I would go to the scene, I would report on what happened, I would interview witnesses. And then when I called back, they would ask me questions. These are the editors now. That witness, what kind of job did he have? Where does he live? What's his exact address? What's his phone number? You know? And then by the time the story appears the next day in the New York Times, the lead is going to favor whatever the police says, and that's high up in the story, and that dictates how the story is going to end up. So I don't know, there's a question here and mixed up with some commentary for me, I apologize. But essentially, maybe you can talk about your frustration dealing with the public relations department or police departments, always spinning and lying.
I'll try to do this really succinctly. Even in decades ago when I was reporting, and then after that when I was editing, you can't afford to ignore the public information office, but it comes to like a police shooting, you never just sort of, you got to do more reporting. If you're a beat reporter, you have to have people in that department that you trust and that you believe for whatever reasons that are going to tell you what the quote unquote truth is. It helps now that so many departments are requiring officers to wear body cams and actually turn them on, or get fired if you turn them off. That helps, but you can't. I've seen people go two ways. Even at most of my time as a reporter was spent at the Washington Post, and there were people who just avoided the public information office. They just figured they were going to lie. They were a waste of time. Their job was to spin stuff as you just described. My tack was like, I don't want to piss them off. I'll just let them, I'll talk to them, but I don't let my reporting stop with them. You don't always have that luxury. And I had that luxury because of the way my beat was structured, that I didn't have to depend on them. I could talk to other people. And when you work a beat, you figure out who the people are who you think are thinking like you. It was a lot easier for me in DC because I was born and raised in DC. And so there were people throughout the department that I grew up with, that I went to high school with, that we did illegal things together when we were growing up that nobody knows about but us. And so I had a trust with them. So I knew I could always pick up the phone and call somebody, or go have lunch or dinner or drinks, or go to their house and say, okay, so what's the real story on this? Right. And that gave me an advantage. You don't always have that advantage. That was one of the reasons I wanted to always, I could have been from Joliet, Illinois. I always wanted to go back. I just wanted to go and work for my hometown paper because it meant something to me. I think it sort of falls in line with what Nick talked about. I wanted to try to do things from that position at the Post to try to better my community. But you just saying you don't stop. I mean, I wouldn't ignore the public information office because they can make your job harder, very easily, but you can't stop your reporting with them. And, I think one thing that's happened with the advent of social media and the prevalence of video cameras everywhere is that you can go out and report on police shootings and with more confidence in talking to people around who might have witnessed it. And you ask enough questions, you can figure out whether people really saw something or whether they were, well, I was down the street, I didn't see it, but I heard some shots and so-and-so told me. But you can figure that out pretty quickly.
Okay, anybody else? Other questions? Okay, Rebecca.
Rebecca.
Thank you, Richard. Great panel tonight. To all the authors, congratulations on your book. Any one of you authors can take this question. What will be in the follow-up book? You had 6 months to put this one together, right? Something has to be missing where you're thinking, okay, we need this section now. Michael, Nick, any of you, take it.
Well, it's funny you should say that, Rebecca. We had those conversations. When I talked to Michael at first, I had two ideas for what I wanted to write about. And one of them is education. And as we have seen with COVID, the pandemic, and this is where our years of being reporters and covering communities and covering issues like these bears fruit. We were not surprised by the inequities that COVID exposed, health disparities, the inequities in education where a lot of Black and brown kids didn't have access to the kind of technology and hardware to keep their education going seamlessly from home, remotely. Education is a huge topic, but there are lots of other topics that we could have delved into. We haven't talked about labor, we talked about economics, we didn't talk about housing, and another person whose name I'm going to bring up that Jackie knows and Michael knows and Keith knows and Patrice knows is the one-time colleague who I barely would say hi to because I was scared of him was Jimmy Breslin. But somebody once asked him, what's the biggest story every day? And he said, doesn't matter what you're talking about every day. In America, the biggest story is race, race, race. every day. Every story has an angle that is predicating on those who are empowered and those who are in privilege, making sure that those who don't have power and don't have privilege don't get it.
Anybody else? Any of the other authors?
Well,
You
go
asked a
ahead.
good
Go ahead.
question. I'll just make it brief. Nick covered it as well, and we're working on. I'm not trying to be vague here, but we are working on another proposal, and so I don't want to give away the farm, But a lot of what Nick covered is what we're probably gonna. I'm gonna probably take to our publisher for our next one. But there's I will tell you this. There's so much material here. There are so many compelling stories. There are people in our community who are starved to tell their stories, right? Starved. They, where I had one person ask me, "Where have you been?" I've been trying to tell my story for years. Where have you been? So there's a lot of work ahead for us. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about the possibilities. I'm excited to continue to talk to people who want to improve the quality of their lives, people who have felt a sense of hopelessness over the years. So every topic that Nick just spoke of is something that we're exploring. But I will leave you with this: we're not going to do it in 6 months. We're going to take some time. I'll tell you that. That's one thing I'll be honest with you about. I'm never doing this again. 6 months.
Thank you.
Okay, Vern Smith had a question.
Thanks, Richard. Mike.
Vern, how are you, my brother?
I'm doing great, man.
Good
Great to
see
see you.
Wow.
So Mike, Keith, and the rest of the team, congratulations on the book. I'm really looking forward to reading it. I was wondering if, based on your reporting, if you all uncovered any, are there any new insights with regard to reforming the police that you all would recommend to policymakers? I mean, after George Floyd, of course, a lot of progressives have been talking about defund.
Yeah.
Defund the police.
Yeah, defund. I'm sorry, defund the police, right? But based on your reporting, anything that you would recommend to policymakers?
Yep. Well, some states have done it. Again, Colorado has done the broadest reforms, both in policing and in terms of what the laws about use of force are. They've really done it. They did a wholesale job. Others have been piecemeal. I would focus on a couple of things. One especially those states that have these law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights, you got to get rid of those. I mean, you just got to. I mean, some of it is so absurd that, for instance, in some places, if you're a police officer and you're being investigated for something that might possibly lead to criminal charges, you can take as long as 2 weeks before you have to talk to any investigators, right? So essentially, you have time to go and get with your collaborators and get your story straight. If you were arrested, Vern, if you were arrested and charged with something, do you think that police would give you 2 weeks before they wanted, if you say, "No, I'll come talk to you in 2 weeks," what do you think would happen to you? That just doesn't exist. I mean, it's a whole litany of things, protections that police officers get in states. The other thing is that even in, there are very few states that have anything on the books about laws about use of force by police officers. And because of that fact, those rare they're hardly ever charged because prosecutors don't think they could win those cases. And two, if they in the unlikely case and rare case that they are charged, when you get to trial, essentially juries, because there's no guidance, there's no broad guidance for them, juries only have to believe that an officer acted reasonably when they decided to take somebody's life. Okay, that just makes it way too easy to acquit officers. The District of Columbia in a couple of places has reformed that and now require juries to take other matters into account. I don't want to get into the details of it. It's in the book, but you can, when you mention reforms, I think legislation is a big way to go. Again, because police unions have been doing this since the early 70s. They were smart and they recognized they could go to state legislatures and change state laws in their favor, and nobody ever challenged them. And I just think that we need to do the same thing. The broad we, not we here, but the broad we need to do the same thing. But the reforms, I think, happen at the state levels, because it ain't going to happen on the federal level.
I wanted to say two things too. One, which we're beginning to see, is reform around how police respond to people with mental health crises. And definitely we need to see change there. And two, when it comes to sentencing, I had so many anecdotes that could be used maybe in another book about what would be different, how victims would want people to be sentenced if they had more than one choice, like to send them to prison. If there were other choices, you would be surprised at how many times victims themselves would choose those other choices, because they know and believe that those choices would make a difference, not only to them and to the harm that was caused to them, but to the community and to that person.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Oh my goodness. You've read everybody's minds then, and
Well, Richard, I'm always happy to ask a couple of questions.
all right, let's go. Do it.
This is Rochelle Riley.
Yes, sure is.
Thank you very much. I had two questions. One had to do with the planning for the book. How did you decide who would write what?
That's oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm muted. Thanks for Rochelle. You never ask any easy questions.
Still a writer by trade, warrior by necessity.
You're right. I picked the. I thought that obviously, no secret, Black Lives Matter had to be written. That section had to be done. When I was at NBC BLK running that section, I commissioned Curtis and Patrice and Keith to write for me. This is kind of the genesis really of this book, because they were working for me as freelance writers for NBC BLK. So these brothers and sisters are battle tested, right? They know how to deliver thoughtful stories in a timely manner. And so Black Lives Matter, to answer your question, had to be written. COVID and the Black community, which Curtis Bunn was already writing for me for NBC BLK, had to be written. Nick Charles came up with an idea that I wanted to do on the role of the Black church. Nick had tremendous insight on this, and in ways that we joke a little bit about, but in all seriousness, he writes some powerful words in this section that folks in the Black church, some are not thrilled with, but they have to respect his point of view and his reporting. So the Black church, that had to be written about. We had to talk about politics, right? We can't write a book, as Keith said, we'll get run out of town. I mean, we have to write about politics. We have to write about the insurrection. And let me tell you, we were writing about the insurrection right up to our deadline. Keith, right? Patrice, Nick, right? We were adding right up until deadline time, where after deadline, we're trying to pull this manuscript out of our hands, push the button. And we kept saying, well, there's so much more to write. So yeah, so are you asking if I matched the sections with the writers? Sort of, but I didn't, it wasn't carved in stone, Rochelle. I said, I asked, I'm not demanding anything, just asking a question. Would you like to write about this particular section? There's nobody better to write about mass incarceration, in my opinion, than Patrice Gaines, right? I mean, she knows this issue inside out. So that was a no-brainer for me. Does that answer your question?
Beautifully. Thank you so much. Okay. And I believe the same thing about Patrice. So congratulations to all of you on a fantastic job.
Thanks, Rochelle.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Anybody else for last couple of questions?
Okay. I have a question then.
Okay, Angela.
Rochelle kind of opened this up, but from a practical standpoint, exactly how did you get this published? Did you write a proposal? Did you have an agent? You have an inside editor at Hachette, who's also my publisher, Michael's publisher, Michael Davis' publisher. So talk to us about that process. How did you get this book sold?
After I took my notes off of that dirty napkin, I called crumpled napkin. I called my agent and showed it to her over Zoom. No, I'm just showing you, can you read this? And but I called my agent, who is incredible. Her name is Jenny Herrera. She said to me, Michael, this is a great start for a proposal. She said, the challenge is going to be this. How are you going to convince a publisher that you can bring together 5 writers to write about critical sections like this in one voice? Because I'll tell you, Angela, they didn't want an anthology, right? Publishers don't want anthologies anymore. They don't really sell. So what I told them was, and Keith and Patrice and Nick know this intimately, I told them we can write this in one voice. Angela, did I know what I was talking about? I don't know. But I thought, hey, this is a vision of mine. It's a vision, and I want to try to, get it off this napkin and into a 300-page book and get it on a shelf. And I believe we can do it. And we started talking about having the chapters talk to each other, right? Intertwined. So it feels like a conversation. And what I knew about Keith and what I knew about Patrice and Curtis and Nick is they write in conversational tones. They write in conversational ways. So I needed to work with 4 people who I knew with like minds that write like me. That's hard, and it's hard for 5 people to come together to do that. So I went to my agent. She said, that's going to be the challenge. But you know what? I like this idea. And I think that this idea can sell. We sold it at auction, by the way. And Hachette came up with the, obviously, but we sold it at auction. And she said, that's going to be the challenge. And guess what? Other publishers did ask that same question, Angela, that you're asking. It's a great question. How are you guys going to pull this off, right? And we had the Zoom calls as a team. I did some individually early on, but then we did everything as a team, and we talked it out and convinced them that this is something that we think we can do, and something that we believe could be a model for the book industry moving forward.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, anybody else? Okay, if there are no further questions, then let's give our guests a hand.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for being here and for giving us some,
for having us.
Yeah, some good inspiration, and for spreading the word about Say Their Name. So thanks again. Now,
okay.
We want to, as we usually do, we want to congratulate folks and give them a little boost here and toast them and wish them well. And since Jackie Jones his name has come up so many times, she'll be the first. We want to, anybody who has a glass, we can raise a toast to Jackie Jones on becoming the Dean of the Morgan State University School of Global Journalism and Communication. Here. A toast to Jackie Jones.
I didn't know we were supposed to be drinking. I would have got a glass of wine or something. Lord. Jackie, congratulations. We love you, Jackie Jones. You know it.
Thank you. Thank you. Love
Yes,
you
I
too.
couldn't have lived without you through a lot of the stuff I lived through.
None of us could. Shoot.
Okay, Jackie,
what
coming for you,
I haven't
Jackie.
moved in 20 years, so.
Jackie, the coquito's coming for you this year.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Okay, Jackie, can you tell us just a little bit about what you plan to do in your new role and what you've been doing since you started on August 1st?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of things. We wanted to boost the student presence on WEAA, which is our NPR affiliated station. We've always called it a learning lab, but it wasn't much of one. The station never had more than maybe 5 interns in a semester. This semester, I'm proud to say we have 27 interns. We have student co-hosts on our public affairs show and on our morning news show. We have students, I think I told Roundtable this a few things back, but we have 2 of our students who are Pulitzer Prize winners. They were part of the team at the New York Times that won the Public Service Medal for the COVID coverage. So we're looking to get students in internships, working on major projects. We've got we're building a center for the study of race and culture in sports. And Edward Robinson, one of our young professors and sports writer, is heading that up. And we've got some major projects about to come online for that. And just, you know, I've been talking to people, I get tons of calls. People thought when we got that NBC money that we were going to be out spending like drunken sailors. And when I told them that we weren't going to be hiring jobs and that the $40 million
What NBC money?
we got $500,000 from NBC Universal for the NBCU Academy. So we so we get to train students, buy equipment, work on reforming our curriculum, and we are undertaking currently a review of our curriculum in the transition between me and Dwayne Wickham. I thought this was a good time for us to look at what we do and whether we're doing it right by the students. Are they getting enough? Are they learning the right things? And because we got accredited last year, the accrediting council has gotten rid of something called the 72-hour rule, and I won't burden you with that. But what it does is give us a wider berth for the things that we want students to do. They can take some extra courses that they couldn't take within the discipline. So I think that we are doing a lot more hands-on stuff, and I'm really excited about the coming year. And then I'm going to be on the road soon to raise some more money because there's never enough.
You're here. Okay. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. The next person we're going to toast is Amanda Barrett, who is this is for her first time with us. Welcome, Amanda. And she is now Vice President and Head of News Audiences for the Associated Press. And that's the highest ranking position that an African-American has held in the news division of AP. So let's toast Amanda. I'm doing all the drinking, but I guess some others. Well, Rebecca, good. And Amanda, tell us, how do you feel about this, and what can we expect?
Well, first, thank you for allowing me to participate. It was a great conversation. Congratulations to the authors, and I cannot wait to read your book.
All right.
I feel like it's so important. And what you're talking about is so important to us all personally and professionally. So thank you. So for me, I'm really focused on not only growing our audience, but our audiences, because I know that for a very long time, our content and a lot of content for a lot of media, mainstream media, was really focused on one audience. And that audience did not necessarily look like the rest of us. And so I'm really focused on growing our audience on our platforms, but also helping our customers reach new and different audiences, and to tell different kinds of stories that haven't always been represented in the AP. So that's what I'm working on. I'm really excited. And I'm also still overseeing our talent development and news coordination. So it's a challenge, but it should be really good.
All right, very good. You're here. Okay, the next person is Nick Charles. We've heard from in one role as co-author of this book, but now he's got another role with NPR as Chief Culture Editor. So let's toast Nick and hear from Nick about what the new Chief Culture Editor has in mind.
First thing I'm going to do is hire anybody Jackie sends to me. NPR is venerable. Everybody knows it. Everybody has a favorite podcast or a favorite show. And my job is to make sure that as we go forward, as Amanda says, that everybody's including in those podcasts and those favorite shows, and the stories and the voices of everyone are included in the podcasts and the shows. And I think they are very receptive. I was very transparent of what I wanted to do, and they were very receptive. So here I am. And the fact that I'll be working, even if not with very closely, but aligned with people like Amanda and Jackie is wonderful. So that's what I'm going to do.
Here, here. All right, very good. Best of luck to you. Let's see who else maybe here is. Is Norman still here? Norman Parish?
Yeah.
Okay, you are here. Okay, we want to congratulate you too and toast Norman at his new job at the Chicago Sun-Times. And Norman is going to be the deputy managing editor for DEI and Administration and Planning. Just left Report for America, and had worked at the Sun-Times before. So, say a few words about what you got in mind, Norman, if you would.
Sure. First, I want to say thanks, Jackie, Nick, and some others who were on this call for helping me with my past job. It was really important work to try to grow newsrooms across the country, and I guess that's pretty much what Report for America was involved in. And so appreciate all your help. And I know Nick and I have talked several times, and you too, Richard. Thank you so much. And also, I look forward to reading you all's book. It sounded very interesting what you all were discussing today. So now back to the Sun-Times. I've always loved the Sun-Times. I'm from Chicago, so I grew up reading that newspaper, and so I want to continue to try to grow diversity there and retain and attract talented journalists there, and stay involved with what they're doing at the Sun-Times. And actually, I don't start until Monday, so I'm still I'm unemployed right now. I'm a week. But no, I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited, and Jackie is a mentor to everyone. I mean, I remember Jackie. There was a guy who Jackie will remember, Leonard Sykes. And Leonard Sykes, the late Leonard Sykes, was a great journalist over at the old Milwaukee Journal, which is now the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. And he used to always sing Jackie Jones's praise, Jackie this and Jackie that. And I met Jackie, and Jackie's just so inspiring. So anyway, thank you, Jackie, for everything you've done. I know you've been hearing that a lot tonight. And Richard, thanks for putting this together. Appreciate it.
All right, very good. And now, one last person that I wanted to recognize. I didn't know I was going to call on him, but Robert Samuels is here from the Post. Yeah, I saw that. What? And since we were talking about George Floyd, Robert is working as a co-author of a new book about that whole case. So, can you give us a sneak preview of what we have in store?
Yeah. Thanks, Richard. I'm a little thrown off. It's good to be here with a lot of names and people who I haven't seen in a very long time. So in May 22, I'm producing a book with Tolu Olorunnipa, who has covered 3 presidential administrations and also works at the Post, that expands a series that we did about how systemic racism impacted the life of George Floyd, that did fairly well. It won a few awards, and it's now being expanded with more reporting that goes up until about now, and how his death might have shaped the idea and the public understanding of systemic racism. We're pretty excited about the reporting. The writing's really hard. It's going to be about 350 interviews at the end of the day, including everyone from his middle school teacher and the person who he first smoked weed with, up till the president of the United States. So it's going to be really thrilling to put it to the world, but it's a lot of hard work. We're about halfway done.
All right, well, congratulations and good luck to you, Robert, on that. Hey, before we go into our introductions, does anybody have any questions for the people we just toasted? Otherwise, we'll just move on. Okay. All right, we're going to start our introductions then. Just everybody knows who's here and who's not here. Rebecca, you are the first on my screen.
Well, thank you. First of all, happy Hispanic Heritage Month. I'll let you guys all know. It's on October 15th, but as a Latina, I celebrate it every day.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the invite. It's always great to be inspired and empowered by all of you who are here. I am the new president of the Society of Professional Journalists. I represent about 6,000 journalists, student journalists, and journalism professors. So please connect. My goal this year is to continue changing the landscape of SPJ. It needs diversity. And right now, people of color are the majority on the board. There's 9 board members, we're the majority. So that says a lot about our organization, that there are people that talk the talk about diversity, we're making it happen. And we're gonna continue doing it. And I hope if you're not a member of SPJ, you will join, because if we stick together, we can move mountains. Thank you.
Here, here. Here, here. All right, Milton Alamati. Unmute, please.
Hi, I'm Milton Alimadi. I'm based in New York City. I publish blackstarnews.com. I am also the author of a new book, Manufacturing Hate: How Africa Was Demonized in Western Media. Essentially, I review 2 centuries of Western writing about Africa and how the stereotypes, the racist stereotypes, were manufactured. I think the most exciting thing I was able to do for this book was to go into the archives of the New York Times, and I unearthed all these correspondence exchange between reporters sent to Africa, beginning like 1959, up to the 1990s, and the letters they exchanged with the editors here in New York. And I knew of the racism, but to read it in the raw was just so shocking. And I first did the research actually when I was a student at the Columbia School of Journalism in 1992. And it was a challenge to publish it. Columbia Journalism Review first accepted it and then backed out and never published it. And nobody would publish it. And so it's been a 30 years ordeal. And finally, I did get a publisher, Kendall Hunt Publishing, and it was published in June 2021. And I'll just give you one example. Homer Bigart, who was a well-known reporter, he had won the Pulitzer Prize twice, and he was sent to cover how independence was faring in Ghana, and also to cover independence in the Belgian Congo. And from Ghana, he wrote a letter to his editor here in New York, saying, I cannot get enthusiastic about these so-called emerging republics. The leaders are either witch doctors or sorcerers. Dr. Nkrumah, describing Kwame Nkrumah, is a Henry Wallace in Burnt Court. I prefer the primitive bush people because cannibalism is the best antidote to the population explosion that everybody is complaining about. And the most interesting part is that the articles that were published under his byline, purporting to be news stories, actually included manufactured scenes to conform with their a racist characterization of Africans. And that's why it was a challenge to publish it. But I'm happy to say I finally got a publisher. And I also, of course, want to thank you, Richard, for being the first person to write about this book in Journal-ism. And I think it's made it a little easier because there's been a follow-up by at least 3 other reviewers. So I thank you for that.
Very good. Yeah, people can just look up Journal-isms in the search engine and you'll see an excerpt from his book. Don Baker.
Well, yeah, thank you for calling on me, because people don't want to talk to photographers.
Come on.
No, actually, I've been at this game for 46 years. I have an identical twin brother, Ron Baker, who's also a photographer. And we've been doing this and covering this area and around the country for a long time. And so I know Richard from back around 1975.
Back in the day.
Yeah, I'm doing a documentary on just about finished, a documentary about a club that was called the Foxtrot Private Town Club at 16th and R Street in DC. And you see it pictured behind me. This building is owned by a group of Black women called the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, which actually started in 1895. Mostly educators, women, Evening Star, were wealthy, and it's just an amazing story because we turned it into a private club, for about 11-year period, but this building is still owned by them. They've owned it since the 50s, and it's now it's become their national office again. So they have several other locations. But the story is about that time period between the riots and the opening of this private club, first Black-owned private club in DC, which Richard can tell you a great deal about. It's been a long time coming. I've been working on it for 10 years. And my first interview was with Dr. Dorothy Height. And she's the one that gave the story.
All right, thank you, Don. Diana Fuentes. Unmute, please.
Yes, sorry. I was trying not to get in the way of people. Yes, another great roundtable, inspiring, like everyone says, really great. Good to have journalists, writing books, and you get more details. You always want more details. I'm executive director of IRE, the Investigative Reporters and Editors. I'm still kind of new to the job, but we're working on our first diversity, belonging, equity, and inclusion symposium. It's coming up October 21, 22. Details at ire.org, and I hope to see a lot of you there. We're trying to get a really diverse group of people. We've got all kinds of sessions dealing with how to investigate, how to make sure that journalism investigations are available to diverse audiences. For example, disabled audiences, for example, users with disabilities, investigating inequities in education, how bad economic development policies are exacerbating school funding inequities. We want to talk about trying to build harassment-resistant newsrooms and more inclusive newsrooms. There's a lot of issues that need addressing, and we're hoping to get into a lot of those issues. Mark Walker, our president, who's only our second Black president, he followed up Cheryl Thompson, will be leading an FOI session. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning FOI leader at the New York Times, and so he'll be leading a master class on that, along with Kamisha Laurie from the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. And that's just a few highlights. We could go on and on, but they're all at ire.org, and just wanted to let you all know about that.
Thank you, Diane. Appreciate that. Roger Witherspoon.
Hi, everybody. Thanks again for the invitation, Richard. As usual, it's informative and a good time. I've been a journalist for about 55 years, and mostly cover health and environmental issues. And now I'm mostly taking it easy.
Okay. All right. We don't want to make these too long. Yannick Rice-Lamb. Yannick, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right.
Hi, everyone. First, I'd like to congratulate all the authors, and also Robert and Norman and Amanda, and especially Jackie and Nick. And I'm Yannick Rice-Lamb. I'm a professor of journalism at Howard University and co-founder of FierceForBlackWomen.com.
Okay, thank you. Claire Regan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Claire Regan in New York City. I'm a longtime journalist at my local hometown newspaper here in New York City, and involved in SPJ. I was recently elected the president-elect of SPJ, which means I get to work alongside Rebecca Aguilar for the next year and then step into the role myself next fall. I have a wonderful teacher and mentor in Rebecca. I'm grateful for that. And we have 3 women leading the SPJ board as officers, and I'm very proud of that as well. And thank you, Richard, and everybody here tonight for the stimulating discussion. I'm grateful to be included.
Very good. Glad you made it. Gloria Minot.
Hi, I'm Gloria Minot, Public Affairs Director formerly of WPFW Radio. Richard, once again, you've just blown this discussion out of the park. Thanks for the wonderful guests you have invited. And I always look forward to just sit back and listen and learn. And I have learned this evening that I have a lot of reading to do. All those, I have to get them, I have to read them. Once again, thank you.
All right. And the authors, thank you as well, and the publisher. All right, Rochelle Riley.
Hello, everyone. I am Rochelle Riley. I am now the Director of Arts and Culture for the City of Detroit after being a columnist for nearly 20 years at the Detroit Free Press. I am celebrating something that hasn't been announced yet, but Rhino Records is putting out an entire collection of everything that Aretha Franklin ever recorded. And I was able to write the liner notes for that. So you'll still be hearing about that, but I'm very excited. And I just really want to thank you, Richard. I'm a journalism's board member, and these are some of the conversations happening in America right now. So I'm eager for us to, blow it up and do some more with it. I love all the people on here. I see several of my friends, and I thank everyone.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Rochelle. Benita Bing.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Benita Bing, president of the Exposure Group, African American Photographers Association, located here in Washington, D.C. I'm also a studio owner at Talbot and Bing Studios, located in the Brookland, D.C. on the Arts Walk, Monroe Street Arts Walk area. And I am the producer of the Journal-isms Roundtable.
Sure is. All right. Angela Dodson. And was Michael there too? I thought I saw him earlier.
Michael Days was here. I think he's left his office, which is like 6 feet that way.
Oh, okay.
But I can get him back perhaps when I finish my remarks. I'm Angela Dodson. I am the CEO of something called Editors on Call. We do editing projects, writing projects for your books, your website, your publication, whatever you need. Michael Days has joined me as my partner since he retired the first of the year, and we are busy most of the time. Not too busy to take new business, but I am a former senior editor of the New York Times. I'm a former executive editor for Black Issues Book Review, and most proudly, I am a 1979 graduate of American University's Master's Program in Journalism and Public Affairs. And I've worked at a bunch of other newspapers, from West Virginia to the Washington Star to the Louisville Courier Journal, where I knew Keith Harriston as a child, basically. And I know a lot of other people on here, and many people have eaten at my table, including Michael Cottman, who brings Tupperware when he comes. So we haven't seen him in a long, long time since he moved away from the area, but we'd like to. And that's about it, I think.
All right.
I'll see if I can get Michael Days to come back either to my office or his office. So.
Okay, that sounds good. Gary Pierre.
Hi, Richard. Thanks for having me. Like Angela said, it's great to be here because you see so many people you haven't seen in so long. And it's good to reconnect and reunite with the NABJ family. I am, a former reporter at the New York Times. Angela helped hire me, recruited me. And I left to start the Haitian Times since 1999. And it's been an interesting journey for me the last couple of years, because now I find myself trying to be the standard bearer and keeping the community's history alive, because we are transforming from, my generation to this generation. And I have been writing a column, really talk about, what things were like, back in the 70s and the 80s, for the youngsters who think that they are inventing everything, that nothing was there before them. So it's sort of like my mission now to really bridge the gap between my generation and this generation. And again, thanks for having me.
Oh, well, thanks for being here. I'm going to put in Journal-isms your column about what it was like to grow up as a Haitian American in these United States among African Americans, and what that was like. That was a good read.
Thank you.
Yes, Rachel Looker.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Looker. I am a current graduate student at American University studying investigative reporting. I'm also working as a political and investigative fellow at USA Today, which has been very exciting. Thank you so much for letting some of the AU students join the conversation. It was great. Congratulations to the authors, and I can't wait to read the book.
All right. Glad you're here. Sophie Austin.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. I'm a data journalism fellow at the Center for Public Integrity, and I'm also pursuing my master's in journalism and public affairs at American University. And I have a particular interest in reporting on environmental justice issues.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's a little bit about me, but I'm really grateful to be here and to meet everyone virtually.
Great, glad you're here. You can go back. We had a whole discussion, a whole roundtable on environmental justice a few months ago, and I think you might enjoy that. Paul Delaney, one of our organizing committee members.
Greetings, everyone. Good to see everybody. It's really great to see a lot of old faces. I won't even begin to name them. Congratulations to the panel. I had some kind of a relationship with every one of them, and it's a pleasure to see all. Speaking of new books, Richard, I just got something from the publisher. People should, can you read that? This is on a new book out on Florence Tate.
Yes.
And I haven't even opened it yet, but it came in the mail today.
Some of us dealt with Florence, but not everybody. So tell us who Florence Tate was.
Oh, God. You have time?
Give us the short version.
I met Florence in Dayton, Ohio. She and her husband, Charles Tate, were the radicals. They led all kinds of demonstrations that bugged the establishment. She eventually came to Washington and eventually became the PR director for Mayor Marion Barry.
Right.
And she, I guess, went on to become PR director for Jesse Jackson. I think that's the short version of her life.
Okay, I think that's enough to whet our appetites on that one.
Yeah.
I see Michael Days has been successfully brought to the screen. And by the way, Angela, you got a shout out from Gary Pierre, who said that you helped hire him at the Times.
I believe I did. I was trying to remember whether I did or not, but yes, I remember him very fondly. I haven't seen Gary in years either.
All right. Okay, Michael.
Well, I was on for more than an hour, sir, but because I had to hear Patrice and Michael Cottman and Keith Harriston, all of whom have been dear friends for many, many years.
All right.
So I thank you much for pulling them on this program. Been as you know, I've been working with Rodney Brooks, former I think deputy managing editor at USA Today and Money, for several months on a book that he's got coming out on the 10th. I guess that's later this week, on fixing the racial wealth gap. So I'm really excited about that, and I'll be bending your ear at some point about having him come on and talk about his book.
Okay.
So that's having left, as you know, I retired from the Inquirer at the end of last year.
Okay.
And working closely with my bride and her business and helping people to develop books and manuscripts, whatever. So that's all been good. And on occasion, I have a nap in the middle of the day.
Yes, we need that, don't we? Dawn Bradbury.
Hello, really interesting and thought-provoking conversation tonight. I'm a freelance journalist based in now New Hampshire, formerly Detroit. Really excited to read this book and just keep this conversation going.
Very good. We're glad you're here. John Yearwood.
Hey, Richard. Always good seeing you and participating in these roundtables. Another great one tonight. I'm the global news editor at Politico and former board member of NABJ, as well as the International Press Institute in Vienna. And see you next month, Richard.
All right. Grace Gold.
Hi, everyone. I'm an undergraduate student at American University, and I've been lucky enough to take classes at the School of Communications. So I really just want to thank you all so much for having me. Just this panel and discussion has been so incredibly valuable. So thank you all.
Very good. Glad you're here. Denise Milan.
Hi, Richard. Thanks so much for the invite and having me here. It's so good to be in this room with all of you and meet all of you. As I work with Diana at IRE, I'm the Deputy Executive Director. And as Diana told you all about our upcoming DBEI Symposium, we're really excited about that. It's coming up in just a couple of weeks. And I'd like
Now,
to—
does everybody know what DBEI is? Why don't you tell people who may
Sure.
not know?
It's diversity, belonging, equity, and inclusion. And for us, that includes both in the newsroom, trying to make newsrooms more equitable and inclusive, and also in our coverage, trying to cover more communities who have traditionally been underserved by investigative journalists. And so we're really excited about this symposium, and I'd like to give a plug for our fellowships. We still have over 50 fellowships to give away, and that includes a full scholarship to the conference and a one-year membership to IRE. And that's open to journalists and educators and students. So I will put a link in the chat to that and would love to see some of you apply or spread the word to your coworkers and your fellow students and whoever you think might be interested.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Sky Whitley.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sky Whitley. I'm an undergraduate at AU as well. I'm a senior studying journalism and environmental science. I'm also interning on the digital desk at NBC Washington right now. Very honored to be here. Thank you for having me. Definitely a lot of wisdom to chew on after this roundtable.
Very good. All right, glad you're here. Mary Curtis, Mary C. Curtis.
Thank you. First of all, I'm zooming in from Charlotte, where I'm in the Zora's Daughters Book Club with Patrice. So I think I know what our next book will be. I want to congratulate all my friends for the book and also for their wonderful achievements. Special shout out to Nick Charles. I've worked with him and for him. Myself, I have the New York Times and Washington Post in my past. Right now, I write a column for Roll Call on the intersection of politics, culture, and race. I host for them the Equal Time with Mary C. Curtis podcast, which looks at politics and policy through a social justice lens. This week we do police reform and a check-in from the White House on COVID and the vaccine. And I'm also a senior leader with the Op-Ed Project. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Mary. Marietta Christina.
Thanks a lot, Richard. I want to thank you so much and also Benita for another amazing journalism's conversation, and congratulations to the authors. Can't wait to read the book myself. So I'm the dean at the College of Communication at Boston University after a 30-year career as a science journalist, and most recently as editor-in-chief at Scientific American. And I just wanted to toss out there for folks I heard a lot of folks who are interested in academia. I'm really privileged that we're actually able to replace 4 of our journalism faculty now. So if anybody's interested in hearing about that, I'll drop my email in the chat. We're looking for a chair, a science journalist, an investigative journalist, and also somebody to write about impact journalism, which our department would like to collaborate with the Emancipator, an upcoming publication from the BU Center for Anti-Racist Research. So thanks a million. It's lovely to meet everybody and to listen to you and learn from you. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Anita Mather Ashton.
Hello, everyone. I'm a graduate student at American University also. I'm getting my master's in international journalism. I'm also the fellow for the investigative reporting workshop, where I'm covering the unfolding situation in Afghanistan and I'm tracking the Taliban. And I'm also a student reporter with the Washington Post as part of their Washington Post practicum. My interest lies in foreign policy, specifically the Middle East. So I've covered US-Iranian relations, Israeli and Palestinian relations, and a lot of other stuff. So thank you so much for having me.
Sure. And what is the Washington Post practicum?
So it's kind of like an internship. So it's a team of about 8 students. And so we're working alongside different teams. So right now I'm working with the national desk, and we're helping them with a lot of the more research side of their investigative pieces.
Interesting. Okay, thanks. Ron Taylor.
Thank you so much, Dick. Welcome to everybody. One more great conversation. These are real tonics. I'm a old friend of Dick's and formerly of the Washington Post. and now I'm the copy editor at the Washington Informer.
All right, very good. All right, there's another screen here. Okay, yeah, we have Elizabeth Posada.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Posada. I'm a student at American University. I'm actually a junior. I'm studying journalism and political science, and I want to concentrate more in investigative journalism. And currently I am an editorial and data intern for DC Witness, which is a nonprofit organization that really just strives to get all cases out there, not just the most newsworthy ones or the most notable ones. We just want to bring awareness to all of them.
That's great. We had the founder of that here visiting us a few months ago. Did I miss anybody? Okay, I think we got everybody there. All right, does anybody have any other things they want to discuss before we bring this to a close? Or
I just want to
announce?
thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here. Okay, all right.
Hey, Richard,
Yes.
at Politico, we have our annual academy for students that we've just put out, to tell people who are interested in attending. Just made the announcement, I think, last week. So
tell people what that is, what that academy is.
Our probably for about 10 years or so, Politico has this very successful academy that trains young people who are interested in political reporting. It's for several weeks during the summer, and a lot of people, and some of you who are on the call, have been involved in the academy as professors, etc. So we've just announced that we will be inviting young people to apply, and you can go to politico.com. Lots of information there about the application process.
Very good.
Just want to say that we're starting that up again this year.
Excellent. Good to know. Good to know. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Otherwise, we will wrap this up and thank everybody for being here, and look for you next month. There'll be an announcement about what we have planned, and those who are we want to thank everybody for watching on Facebook Live as well. Those who are on the Zoom will be getting later on a copy of the chat so that they can see what people have talked about and the links they have shared with us. So thank you, everybody. I'm glad you helped make this a success, and we'll see most of you, I hope, next month. So thanks again.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.